one feature of Christianity that is often talked about, discussed, written about, preached, speculated upon, and in some cases even feared, is the whole idea of the Antichrist, this figure that can be a monstrous figure or sometimes one of great beauty and charm that has as a particular mission the goal of leading the people astray right before the second coming of Christ. And so there's a great speculation on what the Antichrist means and who that person or persons might be. But believe it or not, in the Holy Scriptures, the term Antichrist is used only 4 times, and only in the epistles of John. 3 times in the first epistle of John, and then once again in the second epistle of St. John, which is one of the shortest books in the Bible itself. But in the book of Revelation, it doesn't focus simply on an Antichrist, but an entire Anti-Trinity, a parody of sorts to the triune God that is worshipped by the Christians and was revealed to us by Jesus Christ. It follows immediately upon the vision of the woman and the dragon, in which after the child of the woman is born and taken up into heaven, and the woman is taken to a place of refuge and protection, the dragon vomits forth a torrent of water that the earth swallows up. And then in frustration, because it can no longer pursue the woman or devour her son, the dragon goes to earth to make war upon her other children. Now, before I go into that particular imagery, there are a couple things I want to kind of revisit. One has to do with the story of creation in the book of Genesis, and the other has to do with apocalyptic mythology that I spoke of in a previous video during the portion of introduction to this series. In the book of Genesis, it speaks of creation prior to God saying, "Let there be light," as the earth was a formless wasteland, darkness covered the abyss, which is the bottomless ocean, the waters that descend into darkness that are uninhabitable by human beings. And so it was darkness and death, darkness and water, before God says, "Let there be light." When we come to the third day, God says, "Let the waters be confined to a basin, so that the dry land may appear." So in many ways, the earth forms around the waters in a basin that confines the waters, either into the ocean or into lakes, or it confines them in their courses to rivers and streams. And that's how it's described in creation. Well, in the book of Revelation, what do we see at the end of the story of the woman and the dragon? In an effort to pursue the woman and capture the woman, a torrent of water comes out of the mouth of the dragon, which the mouth of the earth swallows. And in many ways, so it's the earth that swallows and confines this flood that comes out of the mouth of the dragon. So we see elements of creation, or at least the confinement of death, as we see in the book of Genesis. And so when the dragon makes war upon the woman's other offspring, he comes to earth and takes his position on the shore of the sea, on the shore of this water that had come out of his mouth that is now confined by the earth. And he calls forth 2 beasts, one from the sea and one from the land. Traditionally, we refer to the sea beast as the Antichrist, and the beast from the land as the false prophet. But what we also see is reminiscent of the mythology of Baal that we spoke of in a previous video, in which when the storm comes over the waters, the god of the sea, the god of death, Yam, tries to push him back. But once Baal comes to the land and the harvest and the banquet is celebrated, he then continues into the desert where he is swallowed by Mot, the god of the desert. And so now, where we once in the ancient mythologies have a god that is in the sea and a god that comes forth from the land, both of them are gods of death, so now we see the dragon calling forth a beast from the sea and a beast from the land. So we kind of see some echoes, not exact parallels, but echoes of that ancient Canaanite mythology in this imagery. And what do we have in this imagery? We have a parody of the Holy Trinity, as it's presented in the book of Revelation. As Christians, as Jesus revealed it, God is a Trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's represented in the book of Revelation by the one seated on the throne, the Lamb who was slain, and the 7 spirits that guide the churches. What we now see in this image, not just of an Antichrist, but of an Anti-Trinity, is we see the dragon, which is a parody of the one on the throne, the beast that comes forth from the sea, which is a parody of the Lamb who was slain, and the beast that comes forth from the earth, which is a parody of the Holy Spirit. And how are these parodied? Well, first of all, we have the beast that comes forth from the sea, and the dragon gives it its power, just as the one on the throne gives his power to, or extends his power to, the Lamb who was slain. The beast from the sea, which we popularly refer to as the beast that is the Antichrist, is a personification of the fierceness and terror of Rome and the empire of Rome that seeks to persecute and destroy God's holy people in the church. And it's personified in the person of the emperor, a figure that demands to be worshipped as a god, in contrast to worshiping the Lamb that was slain. And so, as a contrast, where we have the Lamb that was slain, the beast from the sea is described as having a mortal wound that was healed. So it really isn't mortal. There's a certain phoniness, a fraud nature to this beast that comes out because it has a mortal wound that really isn't mortal, as opposed to the Lamb that was slain. So there's a phoniness, a fraudulency in this beast that comes forth from the sea. Also, the beast that comes forth from the land is a parody of the Holy Spirit, because just as the spirits inspire the people of God to worship the Lamb, so too does the second beast from the earth inspire the people to worship the first beast. And so it is called the false prophet. And in these three figures, the dragon, the beast from the sea, and the beast from the earth, the dragon, the proverbial Antichrist, and the false prophet, we see not just the Antichrist, but something much larger and perhaps even more fearsome. We see an Anti-Trinity, a parody of the Holy Trinity that is worshipped by the people of God, that is worshipped by the Christians, and is in fact the power behind the Roman Empire that seeks to draw people astray and to counter the God that Christians wish to worship. At the end of that passage also comes an element of the Antichrist that we'll discuss in the next video, in that the second beast inspires the people to worship the first beast, and those who do so are marked with a particular number that stands for a certain name. And so there's a particularity, something specific that that first beast represents. And we will look at it in the next video when we examine that number that stands for a certain name, that number that is also a subject of much discussion, the number 666.